What's up, everyone? Welcome to another episode of the Will and Rock MMA podcast.
What's going on, everybody? Let's jump straight into some UFC news like we usually do. We got Johnny Walker versus Justin Ledet fighting February 2nd in Brazil on UFC ESPN 2, which is still something that we're starting to figure out. If ESPN has several channels, does this mean this ESPN 2 the channel?
Right.
Or this is a second event on ESPN?
I would like to think it's the channel, but we've got to look into
I think it is. And I'll explain why after this fight. But either way, this fight is going to be explosive. No one's going to the ground.
Right.
This fight's going to be bombs away.
Right.
And the first one to touch is going to be the winner.
You know, Johnny Walker's coming out of a tremendous win.
And such a short span of time. We're talking about 2 months. 2 months.
But even then, it was so impressive, the win, right?
Yeah.
Tremendous knockout. He caught him in the clinch, ended up elbowing him, knocking him out in the first round within like 2 minutes of the fight. So perfect momentum to go into the next fight. You figured he did not get injured by any means, or should I say hurt by any means, because the fight barely lasted that long. So book the kid back into the octagon and see what he got. I'm really looking forward to this. The same thing goes for Ledet.
3 month span, and they're shooting him straight back into it. I think it's phenomenal.
I agree, man.
And Ledet too, man. Ledet is a force to be reckoned with. He's somebody who just goes in there. He just doesn't give a fuck, man. He goes in there and throws bombs, you know. And this is going to be a fight that I don't think is going to go to the ground either way. So this actually benefits Justin in his own way.
Right.
Next fight, which actually I'm looking forward to, is Kron Gracie is going to fight versus Alex Caceres, and that's taking place January 26 on UFC 223 as a California fight.
Right.
Well.
I really like this fight. Besides it doing it in Kron Gracie's hometown of California, where you know he was pretty much raised. We have to remember it's a perfect opponent to put against a guy that is just being a newcomer in the UFC. Caceres has experience in the octagon, but he's been up and down, really hasn't had any winning streaks necessarily. I believe that is a perfect matchup for Kron Gracie to get his spotlight into the UFC, and I do believe that Kron Gracie has the upper hand, obviously, in the jiu-jitsu factor. However, how long is Caceres going to leave it on the floor for is pretty much up to what Kron Gracie is planning on doing in that octagon. So
No, yeah. I think it's a great matchup. I think it's going to be a great matchup. Alex does such a phenomenal job, and when you find someone who's such a great jiu-jitsu fighter, is keeping the distance away from him, and his kicking and his punches are very long. He's a very short guy, but he's very long and lanky. And he goes by Bruce Leroy because he idolizes Bruce Lee, and his kicks and the way he stands.
And he moves really well.
And the way he stands, that karate stance, really is hard to take down. So that's going to be a good fight overall. I think it's, like you said, a great fight for Kron to be the first fight into the UFC and to reestablish that Gracie name that has really just become a jiu-jitsu name at this point. So we'll see what ends up happening there. And then, man, we have fucking Dominic Cruz getting injured off the John Lineker fight. This is a huge blow to that weight class, but it's also a huge blow to his career.
Yeah.
I think at this point
it's been he's has lost out on so many fights because of his injuries throughout the year. And as of late, it's been happening so often. Not to mention, he lost his last bout in the octagon, right? So
that was so long ago as well.
Yeah, it was so long ago. So I mean, we're talking about a weathered down Dominic Cruz, who's people really picked up the style that he introduced pretty much, which was that pretty orthodox movements in the octagon, never really settling on his back foot, just continue to move, and he didn't knock you out with power. He knocked you out because you didn't expect the punch coming for you, right? And this is what Cody Garbrandt kind of picked up, and this is what TJ Dillashaw picked up, Demetrius Johnson also picked up. He is the founder of that particular style. It's sad that he hasn't been performing as of late because of his injuries, and now he's officially, been out of that fight with John Lineker for UFC 233. So it's really, really depressing to see his career just on a fall. I prefer him to just retire and say, you know what, I'm done with the UFC, I'm done with MMA, it's a new chapter in my life. As you know, he does commentating as well.
His commentating is great,
and it's one, yeah.
He compliments Joe Rogan very well when he's done it with Joe Rogan, when he's done it with Jimmy Smith or John Anik. Like he does such a well job with them. I agree, man. I think it's time to hang up the gloves. If not, if he does take a fight, he needs to be a bit more consistent in his fighting. Meaning that if he does come back, his next fight should not be such a long layoff.
Right.
Because he needs to be busy. He needs to stay busy, especially if he's going to go into title contention, because every time he fights and he wins, he looks like he's a champion, you know? So he needs to keep that momentum going if he decides he wants to stick around for the future with the UFC. And then we got Jose Aldo versus Ronento Mociano, which is going to be a phenomenal fight. I am so fucking looking forward to this. February 2nd in Brazil. This is also on UFC ESPN 2, which once again we don't know what the hell that means.
Right.
But this is such a phenomenal fight. You got someone like Ronento who just fought, amazing performance, ended up submitting the fighter he ended up fighting, which I can't necessarily recall, which was also a big name. Renato ended up fighting. And then you got Jose Aldo, who also just came out of a very impressive victory as well. Who needed it? Who needed that victory?
And how he defeated who the hell did he fight? It was a body shot against Little Heaven. What is it?
Jeremy Stevens. I agree. Yeah. And to beat someone like Jeremy Stevens, who had full momentum going into that fight, had such a great winning streak, really was one fight away from going to that fight, to the title, should I say. And having someone like Jose Aldo, the veteran, figuring out how he can knock someone like that out,
opening,
and also taking a fight like that, because that could have hurt his career so much had he taken that loss. That would implement some retirement for him as well.
Yeah.
Now going in with someone like Renato is a great opportunity. He's like fighting a younger fighter. He could put him right back down and say, "Listen, buddy, you're too young for this division just yet. Your time will come."
It kind of reminds me like for Frankie Edgar did to Jair Rodriguez. That's a performance that Jose Aldo really needs when he fights against Maiciano.
I think at this point he just needs to win. I know it sounds corny and it sounds like every fight should be like that, but Jose Aldo needs a victory because he's already starting to look sluggish and a little bit on the older side.
Yeah,
he's been fighting for many years as well.
No, I agree with you 100%. I believe that Jose Aldo has more to lose than Maicano does. Maicano's a younger fighter coming into this bout, and if he takes a loss, he could always pick himself back up. Because he's a young fighter fighting a legend like Jose Aldo, one of the best bantamweights in the division. If Jose Aldo takes that loss, it obviously would hurt him more than it would hurt Maiciano. So
absolutely.
So I believe that he needs to come out guns blazing, and back to like what I said, he needs to make him look like Jair Rodriguez when he fought against Frankie Edgar.
And then last but not least for UFC news, we got Jimmy Rivera going up against Aljamain Sterling. That's also on February 2nd on UFC ESPN 1, and that's in Phoenix. They're going to fight Phoenix, Arizona. It's
an interesting fight.
It's a great match versus someone like Sterling, who has really become a jiu-jitsu specialist in there, and someone like Jimmy Rivera, whose timing is precise and his power is tremendous.
Yeah.
You got Jimmy coming from North New Jersey, and then you have Sterling coming from Long Island. So they're not far from each other. This is going to build the momentum going into this fight. These two guys are the truth. I still believe this is a little bit premature for Sterling to take a fight with someone like Jimmy Rivera right now.
I don't know if it's premature in the sense that he hasn't been performing, as well as of late, but not necessarily because he hasn't had the experience in the octagon like Jimmy Rivera has. I just believe I'm guessing what you're trying to say is because he hasn't been performing up to his potential, to put him against a guy like Jimmy Rivera, who's been freaking, one of the best fighters in that division. So I would have to agree with you. It is interesting to know whether or not Sterling is looking to stand up and bang with Jimmy Rivera, which I highly doubt he will. He's going to want to do the takedown, and the question is, what round does it come in? Does it even happen? And how could Jimmy Rivera keep away from that? And if so, could Jimmy Rivera knock out Sterling? Sterling has been knocked out before, so A good matchup just because for this the same exact discussion. You know, people that come in to the octagon with the Brazilian mindset and a person that comes in with a tremendous stand-up game. The question is, which style wins that fight? It's interesting to really find out.
No, but that's totally worth watching. Absolutely, totally worth watching. All right, guys. So we're gonna go into UFC on Fox 31. First fight. I really like this first fight. We got Jimmy Miller, who just came out of a huge victory and is still guns blazing, versus Charles Oliveira, which is another guy who. Both of these guys, for some reason, have their ups and downs in their careers. They'll lose 2, win 2, lose 2, win 2. Now they're at a point in their career where they're just getting older. They're not getting younger. And even though Charles is still very young, Jimmy necessarily isn't. They're at a point where they need victories at this point in their careers, man. There is no loses. There's just no. You got to start contemplating retirement after some point.
I agree with you. I think Jimmy Rivera is a perfect stepping stone to start off your career. However, a guy like Charles Rivera has been same thing, up and down throughout his whole career in the UFC. Him stepping into the octagon against Jim Miller, it's also one of those veteran fights to see who's going to win this fight. For some weird reason, every time I think about both of those fighters, I feel like they fought before. And if I'm not mistaken, Charles Oliveira, I think, caught him in a leg lock and submitted him. I could be wrong. This could be probably a rematch. I have to look. We would have to look into it. Very interesting fight. If it is, by the way, I think it's time for Jim Miller to really show that it was a mistake during that fight.
No, it's a bit of a fluke, yeah.
Right, the fluke is the right word.
All right, next fight, guy, we got Rob Font, I should say, versus Sergio Pettis.
Ooh, good fight.
So Rob Font, I mean, this fight has spectacular written all over it if they stand and bang.
Yeah.
Because they're such technical fighters. You got someone like Sergio Pettis who's really grown into this MMA world.
Yeah.
Coming off a loss, but still holds so much value to that weight class. And then you got someone like Rob Font, who really has really made a name for himself. I mean, I remember I don't know if it was episode 3 or 4 we started talking about him, and he had the fight. I think he lost that fight. He's really come a long way.
They both have. They really both have.
So this is such a great, and these are young fighters, man.
Yeah.
This is the future of that weight class. This is the future of the UFC. I can't wait. That's definitely going to be something to watch.
Yeah, no, I agree with you 100%. I believe that they both going to stand up. The question is, who's going to get the better hand on that stand-up game? Could it be Sergio Pettis? Possibly. Could it be Rob Font? Probably. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it's a good match there.
Next fight we got Edson Barboza versus Dan Hooker. You want to speak on this? Okay, so the only thing I would say is I'm not familiar with Dan Hooker, but I know what Edson Barboza brings to the table.
Dan Hooker is a motherfucker. I mean, he's been pretty much dominant on his last few fights. The question, I mean, I spoke about how Jim Miller is like a stepping stone. It's the same thing goes for Edson Barboza at this point.
Yeah.
Edson Barboza, unfortunately, he's for the top of the top. He had his wins, he had some losses, but at this point of his career, they pretty much putting him in there. He's a spectacular fighter. Don't get me wrong. He has a bunch of highlight reels under his belt.
That spinning back kick was fucking phenomenal.
Yeah, but going into this fight, I believe that that Hooker might have the upper hand, but Hooker really needs his fight. He's going into this momentum. Hooker's going to this momentum. He needs to get this victory and keep it rolling, because one fall down and you're gonna go back down to the waiting list. So good luck to both fighters, but I believe that Dan Hooker might just have the upper hand in this fight.
And last but not least, the main event, we got Kevin Lee versus Al Iaquinta. It is a good card, and I love the fact that they put it's a free card on Fox, and they're putting just 4 main events. I feel like that card is gonna end really fast with the fighters that we've mentioned. There's a lot of KO power going into this event. We got Kevin Lee and Al Iaquinta. I have Kevin Lee winning this fight. And the reason why and granted I shouldn't be doing predictions right now, but the reason why I do is I feel like Kevin Lee has really dedicated his life into this mixed martial arts world. I think he has developed. He's come such a long way from their first fight where he lost. He's a completely different fighter. I mean, we're talking about Kevin Lee is one KO spectacular away or submission away from going for that belt.
Yeah, I agree.
Or one fight going for that belt. But then you got someone like Alaquinta whose heart is bigger than anybody else's, you know. Took a last fight with Khabib for that Brooklyn fight when Conor McGregor did a fucking disgusting event for Brooklyn. It was probably the worst event we've ever seen live, literally, for the many events that we've gone to. And Alaquinta showed heart, and he shows that he can take a punch. The only way I see Alaquinta losing this fight is really submission, because either that or he loses in decision. I don't see him getting KO'd.
No, I agree with you. I don't see KO is definitely not something that roams around my head when I think about this fight going down. However, I do believe Iaquinta has the upper hand going into this fight. We have to remember the dominance that Khabib Nurmagomedov had against Conor McGregor. And then if you put him in that role, Conor McGregor's role, which was Iaquinta when everybody couldn't fight Khabib, you saw the performance that Iaquinta put. He put one of the best performances against who is a champion now, who is known as one of the best fighters in the UFC right now, which is Khabib. I believe Iaquinta is coming in with great momentum, and I believe Iaquinta probably has his number. I believe Iaquinta takes this fight, man.
Oh wow, that's a lot. That does say a lot. You know, if you go to his Instagram page, Alaquinta's Instagram page, he's also a real estate guy. Yeah. And the thing about, and the reason why I mentioned that, granted, there should be life after your fight, and I think that's phenomenal that he's doing that. But the reality is that when you don't focus 100% into fighting, and you do have that background job, and something that you've really taken into a profession as well, it's challenging to balance both. We've seen a lot of these commentators take big losses because they haven't fully devoted themselves into training camps, because they have obligations with outside of the UFC.
Except Daniel Cormier.
Great point. No, great point. But we've seen it. You know, this sport is, you have to be fully 100% devoted to the sport in order for you to take victories. And the reality is, Alaquinta, according to his Instagram page, is not fully doing that. But granted, it could. I don't know his schedule. I don't want to speak on that. But I will say that it would be nice to if Alaquinta does win, it just proves to you that there is life after the UFC, and you could balance out two jobs while you're fighting,
especially as a fighter.
Yeah. All right, guys. I think that's everything for today. We'll catch you guys next week like we usually do. Peace,
guys.